In 1962, a plane went missing in New Zealand's southern Alps. That plane was a de Havilland Dragonfly, something of a similar vintage to the aircraft here. But after 60 years of searching, the Dragonfly has never been found.
Mystery surrounds a fresh attempt to find the remains of an ill-fated tourist flight that's believed to have crashed in the Southern Alps more than 60 years ago.
What happened to flight ZK-AFB?
Families of the pilot and passengers have no closure. Locals have become obsessed with it, got all kinds of theories on what happened that day. And now one aviation historian believes 5 other aircraft went missing in a similar area and has labelled it New Zealand's Bermuda Triangle. But this is not a case of something supernatural. New Zealand's rugged wilderness is far more dangerous than that.
Yes, it's easy to get to New Zealand.
It wasn't until the 1960s that New Zealand's tourism industry really got off the ground.
With Cathedral Square as its centre, Christchurch has the quiet charm of a cathedral city.
And it soon became clear that the best way to see this country's natural beauty was from the sky.
Over 12,000 feet, towering over them all.
War-era planes like these were brought over to New Zealand, but like most tourist activities here, the scenic flights came with risk.
Here we are embarking 8 passengers into the Domini owned by Brian Chadwick, mid-January 1962 at Harewood Airport, now Christchurch Airport. After taxiing down the runway to the south end, we take off to the north into a hazy sky.
You can see the scale of these mountains, but for enterprising pilot Brian Chadwick and his passengers, adventure was the point.
Brian Chadwick pioneered the first Christchurch to Milford Sound tourist flying from the late 1950s. It was a long trip over some of the most mountainous terrain in New Zealand and amongst the most rugged terrain in the world. So, you know, extremely good for tourist passengers. But the route was high over the Southern Alps, the bush, the mountains, the snow line. A small aircraft is like a needle in a haystack.
On February 12, 1962, 5 people boarded the de Havilland Dragonfly ZK-AFB aircraft. 47-year-old Brian Chadwick was the pilot. Australians Lewis Rowan, Daryl Shields were also on board, as well as Elwyn Saville and his New Zealander wife, Valerie Saville. His scenic flight would take off from Christchurch, travel over the Alpine Ridge towards Fox Glacier, then track south towards Milford Sound on the west coast. After lunch on the ground at Milford Sound, Chadwick would fly to Queenstown, refuel, and then set off with a flight back to base at Christchurch. But on February 12, 1962, Brian Chadwick and his passengers never made it to Milford Sound. And Richard Waugh believes there are 5 other aircraft, those pilots and those passengers also missing across the Southern Alps region.
I described this lower area of the South Island as New Zealand's Bermuda Triangle. So in addition to the Dragonfly, there are 21 men, women and children missing in aircraft in that broad area from Mount Aspiring to Haast to Milford Sound.
So what happened to the Dragonfly? And what are the New Zealand authorities doing about finding all of those lost to the mountains? Richard Waugh is an important part of the story of the Dragonfly. He's a wealth of information on vintage planes and aviation in New Zealand, and that's probably because the Dragonfly has always been in his family. His dad was Brian Waugh, friend and fellow pilot of Brian Chadwick. Brian Waugh was there that day the Dragonfly disappeared, and his memoir offers us precious insight into what happened. And it started with a weather warning.
It was early morning and Hokitika looked quite sleepy beneath me. Another typical day, I thought. Little did I realise that 12th of February 1962 would be a day not easily forgotten. While the coast weather was good, it was pitch black in the ranges. I smiled smugly. Chaddy will not be carrying any scenic passengers to Milford today, I thought. Well, of course, Chadwick did indeed take off in the Dragonfly that day. And into the afternoon, Beau's words came slowly over the phone. Your cobber Chadwick is an hour overdue at Milford. We're a little worried.
Even now there's debate around how far into the journey Chadwick made it, because ultimately that would help reveal the location of the Dragonfly. Did he make it over the mountains, or did he go down in the dark storm clouds on the eastern side? John Rowan's brother Lewis was on the Dragonfly that day, and he believes the New Zealand authorities should do more to listen to the volunteers who have dedicated so much time to answering those questions.
You can't discount any of the theories, so we have to keep an open mind.
There are 3 people with 3 different theories about where among the mountains of New Zealand's South Island the Dragonfly went down: Bobby Reeve, Lou Bone and Gavin Grimmer. Bobby Reeve believes the Dragonfly did not make it to the western side of the mountains and went down somewhere near the Huxley River, an area just beyond 2 locations where there were reported sightings, Fairlie and Twizzle. Gavin Grimmer believes the Dragonfly made it over the Mount Aspiring National Park, but went down closer to Milford Sound, near an old airstrip and hut along the Kaipo River. Lou Bone believes the Dragonfly went down on the east side of Mount Aspiring, in an area unofficially known as Rainbow Valley. One of the original RAF pilots who searched for the Dragonfly in 1962 also believed it went down near Mount Aspiring. The valley in question sits between Mount Aspiring and a mountain now named Dragonfly Peak. These men and the teams they've assembled have searched for the Dragonfly out of their own interest and with their own time and money. The Dragonfly is the most searched for aircraft in New Zealand history. And that includes the Royal Air Force back in the 60s, and there was a New Zealand police search as recently as 2023. But none of the modern era official searches have centred on the places where those most obsessed with the Dragonfly believe it could be.
It's a little bit frustrating in a way that the latest technology hasn't been used. But I think in the end, it could be technology that finds it.
Experts fear that at this point someone would have to literally step on the Dragonfly to find it. Lewis Rowan climbed on board the aircraft with Brian Chadwick that day in search of adventure. And ultimately the terrain that made the flight so scenic would take his life and make it nearly impossible for him to be found.
I'd still like to see the closure, yes, and have the mystery solved.
So will that ever happen? Well, the challenge is not a small one. But if the modern era of amateur and open source investigations and internet sleuths have taught us anything, it's that those who get most obsessed with a mystery can sometimes provide the clue that helps solve it. All those looking for the Dragonfly are asking for is that their theories are put to the test.